Hello everyone, let us continue our fairy tale, The Rose with 12 Petals, and we're now on The King. What would you do if you were James IV of Britannia, pacing across your council chamber floor before your councillors, the Count of Edinburgh, whose estates are larger than yours, and include hillsides of uncut wood for which the French Emperor, who needs to refurbish his navy after the disastrous Indian campaign, would pay handsomely? The Earl of York, who can trace descent, albeit in the female line, from the Tudors, and the Archbishop, who has preached against marital infidelity in his cathedral at Aberdeen. The banner over your head, embroidered with the 12-petalled rose of Britannia, reminds you that your claim to the throne rests tenuously on a former James's designs. Edinburgh's thinning hair, York's hanging jowl, that seems edged with a gold thread, where the Archbishop's robe has been let out, warn you, young as you are, and with a beard that shines like a tangle of golden wires in the afternoon light, of your gaudy future. Britannia's economy depends on the wool trade, and spun wool sells for twice as much as unspun. Your income depends on your wool tax. The Queen, whom you seldom think of as Elizabeth, is young, you calculate. 3 months before she recovers from the birth. 9 months before she can deliver another child. You might have an heir by next autumn. Well, Edinburgh leans back in his chair, and you wish you could strangle his wrinkled neck. You say, I see no reason to destroy 1,000 spinning wheels for one mad woman, Madeleine. Her face puffed with sleep, her neck covered with a line of red spots where she lay on the pearl necklace you gave her that night before. One black hair tickling your ear. Clever of her to choose a spinning wheel. I rely entirely on Wolfgang Magus, whom you believe is a fraud. Gentlemen, your fairy tales will have taught you that magic must be met with magic. One cannot fight a spell by altering material conditions. Guffaws from the Archbishop, who is amused to think that wands read fairy tales. You're a selfish man, James IV, and this is essentially your fault. But you have spoken the truth, which, I suppose, is why you are the king. The Queen's Dowager. What is the girl doing? Playing at tug-of-war. Evidently, and far too close to the stream. She'll tear her dress on the rose bushes. Careless, these young people, thinks the Queen Dowager, And who is she playing with? Young Lord Harry, who will one day be Count of Edinburgh. The Queen Dowager is proud of her keen eyesight, and will not wear spectacles, although she's almost 63. What a pity, the girl is so plain. The Queen Dowager jabs a needle into a black velvet slipper, eyes like boiled gooseberries that always seem to be staring at you, and no discipline. Now in her day, thinks the Queen Dowager, remembering backwards, and nuns who rapped your fingers with canes. In her day, girls had discipline. Just look at the Queen. No discipline. 2 miscarriages in 10 years, and dead before her 30th birthday. Of course, linen is so much cheaper now that the kingdoms are united. But if only her Jims, which is how she thinks of the king, could have married that nice German princess. She dabs the needle again, pulls it out, jabs, knots. She holds up the slipper, and then its pair, comparing the roses embroidered on each toe in stitches. So even they seem to have been made by a machine, quite perfect for a Jim's, to keep his feet warm on draughty palace floors. A tearing sound and a splash. The girl, of course, as the Queen Dowager could have warned you. Just look at her, with a skirt ripped up one side, and a petticoat muddy to the knees. I do apologise, madame. I assure you it's entirely my fault, says Lord Harry, bowing with the superfluous grace of a dancing master. It's all your fault, says the girl, trying to kick him. Alice, says the Queen Dowager. Imagine the Queen wanting to name the girl Elaine. What a name for a princess of Britannia. But he took my book of poems and said he was going to throw it into the stream. I'm perfectly sure he did no such thing. Go to your room at once. This is the sort of behaviour I would expect from a chimney sweep. Then tell him to give my book back. Lord Harry bows again and holds out the battered volume. It was always yours for the asking, Your Highness. Alice turns away, and you see what the Queen Dowager cannot. Despite her keen vision, Alice's eyes, slightly prominent, with irises that are indeed the colour of gooseberries, have turned red at the corners, and her nose has begun to drip. Next, the spinning wheel. It has never wanted to be an assassin. It remembers the cottage on the Isles, where it was first made, the warmth of the hearth, the feel of the maker's hands, worn smooth from rubbing and lanolin. It remembers the first words it heard. And when are you carving roses on it, then? This one's for a lady. Look how slender it is. It won't take your upland ram's wool. Yearling it'll have to be for this one. At night it heard the waves crashing on the rocks, and it listened to their sound mingled with the snoring of its maker and his wife. By day it heard the crying of the seabirds, but it remembered, as in a dream, the songs of inland birds and sunlight on the stone wall. Then the fisherman would come. One would say, What's that you making there, Enoch? Is it for a midget, then? Its maker would stroke it with the tips of his fingers and answer, Silent, lads, this one's for a lady. It'll spin yarn so fine that a shawl of it will slip through a wedding ring. It has never wanted to be an assassin, and as it sits in a cottage to the south, listening as Madeline mutters to herself, it remembers the sounds of seabirds and tries to forget that it was made, not to spin yarn so fine that a shawl of it will slip through a wedding ring, but to kill the king's daughter. Princess is the next. Alice climbs the tower stairs. She could avoid this, perhaps, disguise herself as a peasant woman and beg her way through the Highlands, like a heroine in Scott's novels, but she does not want to avoid this, so she is climbing up the tower stairs on the morning of her 17th birthday, still in a nightgown and clutching a battered copy of Goss's poems, whose binding is so torn that the book is tied with pink ribbon to keep the pages together. Her feet are bare, because opening the shoe closet might have woken the Baroness, who has slept in her room since she was a child. Barefoot, she has walked silently past the sleeping guards who were supposed to guard her today with particular care. She's walked past the Queen Dowager's drawing room, thinking, if anyone hears me, I will be in disgrace. She has spent a larger portion of her life in disgrace than out of it, and she remembers that she once thought of it as an imaginary country, disgrace, with its own rivers and towns, until trade routes. Would it be different from her mother were alive? She remembers her face, creased from the folds of the pillow, pale lips whispering to her about the lily maid of Astolat. It would, she supposes, have made no difference. She trips on a step and almost drops the book. She has no reason to suppose, of course, that the witch will be there so early in the morning, but somehow Alice hopes she will be. She is, sitting on a low stool with a spinning wheel in front of her. Were you waiting for me? Asked Alice. It sounds silly. Who else would the witch be waiting for? But she can think of nothing else to say. I was, the witch's voice said, and although she has wrinkles at the corners of her mouth, and her hair has turned grey, she's still rather beautiful. She's not exactly what Alice expected. How did you know I was coming so early? The witch smiles. I've gotten rather good at magic. I sell fortunes for my living, you see. It's not too much, just enough to buy bread and butter, and to rent a small cottage. But it amuses me, knowing things about people, their lives and their future. Do you know anything about me? Alice looks down at the book. What idiotic question to be asking. Surely a heroine from Scott's novels would think of it better. The witch nods. Sunlight catches a silver cross suspended from a chain around her neck. She says, "I'm sorry." Alice understands and her face flushes. "You mean that you've been watching all along? That you've known what it's been like, being the cursed princess?" She turns and walks to the tower window, so the witch will not see how her hands are shaking. "You know the other girls wouldn't play with me or touch my toys. That the boys would spit over their shoulders to break the curse, they said. Even the chambermaids would make the sign of the cross when I wasn't looking at them." She can feel tears, where they always begin at the corners of her eyes, and she leans out the window and to the cool breeze on her face. Far below, a gardener is crossing the courtyard, carrying a pair of pruning shears. She says, "Why didn't you remove the curse then? Magic doesn't work that way." The witch's voice is sad. Alice turns around and sees that her cheeks are wet with tears. Alice steps toward her, trips again and drops the book, which falls under the spinning wheel. The witch picks it up and smiles as she examines the cover. "Of course, you're Gweth. I always wondered what happened to Wolfgang Magus." Alice thinks with relief, "I'm not going to cry after all. He went away after his sister died." She said, "It was consumption, for years and years. He was always sending her money for medicine. He wrote to me once after he left, from Berlin, to say that he had bought his own master's house, but I never heard from him again." The witch wipes her cheeks with the back of one hand. "I didn't know about his sister. I spoke to him once. He was a kind man." Alice takes the book from her, then says carefully, as though each word has to be placed in the correct order, "Do you think his spell will work? I mean, do you think I'll really sleep for 100 years, rather than, you know?" The witch looks up, her cheeks still damp, but her face composed. "I can't answer that for you. You may simply be preserved, in a pocket of time, as it were." Alice tugs at the ribbon that binds the book together. "It doesn't matter, really. I don't think I care either way." She strokes the spinning wheel, which turns as she touches it. "How beautiful, as though it had been made just for me." The witch raises a hand to stop her, perhaps, or arrest time itself. But Alice places a finger on the spindle and presses until a drop of blood blossoms, as dark as the petal of a cardinal de Richelieu that runs into her palm. Before she falls, she sees the witch with her head bowed and her shoulders shaking. She thinks for no reason. She can remember Elaine the Fair, Elaine the Lovable. And that's the end of part 2, guys. Very interesting indeed. We shall continue soon with the rest. Many blessings.